As the pattern was, so ought also the disciple to be. If a man is bearing a heavy burden, but he then also seeks the help of others and lays part of it on them, or if he bears a heavy burden, but bearing it is all that he can think of, then he indeed bears the burden wholly or in part, but he does not bear it lightly. If a man must concentrate all his energies on bearing his burden, if he does not have one single thought, one single moment to spend on others, if he thus bears his burden with the utmost exertion, then he does indeed bear it, but he does not bear it lightly. Perhaps he bears it patiently, but he does not bear it meekly, for courage is noisy, magnanimity struts, patience is silent, but meekness bears the heavy lightly. We can see courage and magnanimity, and we can see the effort patience puts forth, but meekness makes itself invisible. It looks so easy, and yet it is so hard. That a man has courage, we can see in his eye. That he has magnanimity, we can see in his form and glance. That he has patience, we learn from his lips which yet are silent, but meekness no one can see. What then is the light burden of meekness? Ah, it is the heavy burden when it is borne lightly. But what is the heavy burden of meekness? Oh, it may vary in the most extreme ways, but it is not this diversity which decides the outcome, but, on the contrary, the meekness. The light burden of impatience can also vary in extremely different ways, but it is not this difference which decides the outcome. On the contrary, it is the unpatience which makes it heavy, the unpatience which does not keep together with courage, and belongs to the race only as a degenerate does. But it is actually true that through meekness, the heavy burden in a devout sense really becomes light, as it is a distressing truth that through impatience the light burden really becomes heavy. Goodness is the easy yoke, and meekness the light burden. Of this there can in all eternity be no doubt, that the good is easy to bear. Therefore the doubt is directed towards something else. It can excellently understand that the good is easy, but it will not believe that the heavy suffering is the good. That meekness is a light burden, of that there can in all eternity be no doubt. Therefore the doubt is directed towards something else. It can excellently understand that meekness is light, but it will not understand that through meekness the heavy burden becomes light, that the burden really becomes light, which, however, it does. Thus, if the man who today does not know whether or not he will be living tomorrow, if he, according to the gospel read, is not concerned for the morrow, for Christ did not come into the world to abolish material anxieties by bringing prosperity, then he indeed bears the heavy burden lightly. Alas, while there are never many who can certainly be said to have a sufficiency for their lifetime, so on the contrary, it may easily seem to the one concerned, whose eye is disturbed by looking too far into the future, as if the material needs might last for an even longer period than his whole life. If this is the case, then he is bearing the heavy burden heavily. But if he patiently resolves to be willing to bear the burden for as long a time as shall be required of him, then he still does not bear it lightly. The most cunning and the strongest enemy is time, especially when it gathers itself for the attack and is called the future. For then it is like the mist which cannot be seen close at hand, but the farther away it is seen, the more terrible it seems. When patience weighs the future with the eye, then one sees how heavy it is. But meekness is not even concerned for the morrow. Meekness quickly withdraws its eyes, and therefore does not see the infinitude of the future. It calls the future tomorrow. The morrow is indeed also the future, but it is the future seen at as close a range as possible. So gently meekness goes forward, so unassumingly it undertakes the future. But at very close range one cannot see the mist, which, if one allows the eyes to interpret it, assumes a threatening form. So neither can one see the future at close range. Therefore, meekness succeeds in not even being concerned for the morrow. Is not this to bear the heavy burden of time and of the future lightly?